I have carried a lot of names in from the cold over the years, but the Kethrun War Marshal's name is the one I still say slowly, the way you say something you don't want to get wrong twice. 3 years before Varn Keep, I stood in the back row at the Sindral Accord and watched that same war marshal, then just a garrison colonel with a voice like gravel, poured down a chute, refuse our escort fleet in front of 11 other delegations. He called it an insult dressed as a gift. He said the Kethrun had bled for their borders since before humanity had learned to smelt iron, and that no soft-skinned species with 3 centuries of starflight would stand watch over Kethrun soil. Commodore Vosk took it without a flinch. She thanked him for his candor, folded the offer back into her jacket, and told her staff to log the coordinates anyway, in case anyone ever asked again. Nobody asked again, not for 3 years. Varn Keep asked. It came in on the old civilian distress band, not the military one, because the military band had gone quiet 6 hours earlier, along with everyone who'd been transmitting on it. The signal was Kethrun war code, badly compressed, repeating a coordinate string and a single phrase that our linguists took 40 minutes to be sure they'd translated correctly. The honor of asking is already paid. It was, near as we could tell, the closest their language came to please. The Skaran ascendancy had been grinding down the Kethrun border worlds for a year, and Varn Keep was the last fortress standing between the ascendancy's advance and the Kethrun homeworld itself. Every neighboring power that owed the Kethrun a favor had found a reason to be elsewhere. The garrison had held for 11 days on rationed charge cells and a wall that was more rubble than wall by the time that signal went out. Command showed Vosk the transmission at 0300 ship time. She read it twice, then said 5 words I've never forgotten. Get the escort fleet ready. The same escort fleet, the one that had sat mothballed and unused for 3 years because a colonel with a gravel voice had called it an insult. Vosk didn't say anything about that when she gave the order, and none of us did either. That's not how we do things. We came out of the drop in full formation, the way we would have 3 years ago if anyone had let us. A carrier, 4 frigates, 2 dedicated dust-off transports, and my platoon riding the lead assault shuttle with the doors already cycling open before we'd finished decelerating. Varn Keep's remaining wall gunners saw us on approach radar and, we found out later, held their fire for 11 full seconds trying to decide if we were a mercy or a mistake. Then the carrier's shields lit up the whole battlefield gold, swallowing 3 incoming ascendancy strike runs before they ever reached the fortress, and the gunners stopped wondering. The frigates took the high ground first, peeling off in a wide arc to pin the ascendancy artillery batteries dug into the ridge above the keep, and I watched their fire discipline from the shuttle window the whole way down. Nothing wasted, nothing showy. 4 ships doing exactly what 4 ships needed to do, and not 1 round more. It struck me, watching it, that this was the same formation, flown by the same crews, that a Kethrun colonel had once called an insult. Nobody in that colonel's chain of command had bothered to imagine what it would look like actually working. From where I sat, it looked less like an insult, and more like the only thing standing between an entire species and its last morning. I went in with the second wave, boots down on scorched stone still warm from the last artillery exchange, daylight cutting hard and white through drifting smoke. The Kethrun garrison that met us at the inner gate were not what I expected from 3 years of hearing them described as too proud to need anyone. They were burned, half of them limping, all of them still holding position, like the wall hadn't already fallen twice that morning. A young trooper, scales gone ash-gray with dust, looked at my rifle and my armor and said something in their own tongue that our translator rendered flat and strange. You were the insult. Not a question. Just a fact. He was turning over out loud, like he couldn't get the weight of it to sit right in his hands. We didn't answer that one. We moved the wounded first. There were more of them than the transmission had let on. Nearly 200 behind the inner wall alone, garrison and civilian staff both. Most of them on their feet, only because lying down had stopped being an option somewhere around day 9. My corpsman worked triage the way she always does, fast and wordless, sorting Kethrun physiology she'd never trained on by instinct, and by asking the least injured medic left standing to translate on the fly. None of them flinched from her hands. That surprised me more than the shields had. I'd expected pride to hold even here, some stiffness at being touched by soft-skinned strangers, and instead I watched a Kethrun sergeant with a shattered leg grip my corpsman's wrist through the whole splint, eyes shut, not making a sound. The young trooper who'd called us the insult ended up carrying stretchers alongside my squad for the better part of an hour, working in silence until the last of the wounded were loaded. Only then did he speak again, quieter this time, asking why we'd come at all when his own colonel had told our commodore to her face that Kethrun didn't need Earth's charity. I told him it wasn't charity, it was coordinates somebody had bothered to keep. He didn't have an answer for that, and neither did I expect one. The war marshal found me near the collapsed East Barracks, where my squad was cutting a trapped support crew out from under a fallen support beam with a torch, and more patience than the job deserved. He stood at a distance at first, the way senior officers do when they haven't decided whether to be seen yet. He was older than I remembered from the Accord footage, more gray along his jaw ridge, his uniform scorched through at the shoulder, where something had come close enough to matter. When the last of the trapped crew came free and stood on their own, he stepped forward. He didn't apologize. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to tell it that way, and it wouldn't be true. What he did was worse, in the way that honesty is always worse than an apology. He looked at the carrier riding low overhead, its shield still humming faint gold against the smoke, and he looked at the shuttle ramps lowering wounded Kethrun onto stretchers our medics were already running toward the dust-off transports, and he asked, in Kethrun formal register, whether the fleet had come at Commodore Vosk's order or at the Earth government's. Hers, I told him. She kept the coordinates. He was quiet long enough that I thought the translator had failed. Then he said the honor of asking is already paid was not, in truth, the phrase his aide had wanted to send. His aide had wanted to send a plainer signal, a shorter one with no honor in it at all, just a request. The war marshal had overruled him and sent the formal phrase instead, because he could not, even with the wall falling, bring himself to send anything else. He told me this looking at the smoke, not at me, and I understood without needing the translator's help that he had not looked directly at a human since the ramps came down. Vosk came through 2 hours later, once the perimeter was secure and the Ascendancy strike group had broken off, rather than test the carrier's shields twice. She found the war marshal exactly where I'd left him, still not looking at anyone in a human uniform straight on. She didn't make him. She stood beside him instead, both of them facing the same smoke, and said only that the coordinates were still good, that they'd stay good for as long as the Kethrun needed them, insult or not. He didn't answer her either. He reached out, slow, and set one clawed hand flat against the hull plating of the nearest shuttle, the metal still warm from re-entry, and he left it there a long moment before he finally turned his head enough to meet her eyes. I filed my after-action report that night, the way I file all of them, plain language, no embellishment. Garrison relieved, casualties recovered, hostile force withdrawn, 0 friendly losses. I didn't write down the part about the hand on the hull, or the part where a colonel who once called our fleet an insult in front of 11 delegations couldn't lift his eyes to a human face until the fighting was already over. Some things you carry instead of filing. I still say his name slowly. I still think, some nights, about a signal that took 40 minutes to translate correctly, because the only people who'd ever needed to say it before had never once considered that we would be the ones listening.